Hi, and welcome to O2 Tara Talks, conversations about one thing you can do right now to stay healthy in your body and your mind. And as always, we start with a little disclaimer. Today's talk is for informational purposes only. Consult your practitioner for guidance specific to your situation. And with that, I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Dr. Stasha Gominak, a neurologist. And I've had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Gominak for my book. And so I'm so delighted to feature her on this series. So hello, Dr. Gominak. How are you today?
Good, Tara. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's good to
Oh,
talk
you
to you
are
again.
welcome. Yeah. So can you, I know everything you do already, but for our viewers, can you tell us in one sentence how you help people?
I'm helping people sleep better. I'm a sleep coach.
Wonderful. And my other role is the sleep sensei, so I am right on board with you on that. And so what is one thing that we can do right now when we're all sort of in this stressful time of life?
I think we should sleep more. That sounds pretty obvious, and it also sounds like it's simpler to say than to do, but sleeping is one of the things that we do to heal.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. It is. It's one of our basic needs. And so it's kind of like yeah, of course I need to sleep more, but we don't necessarily. So can we talk for a minute to maybe bring it to the front of everybody's mind, like why sleep really is so essential for us, especially when we're stressed?
Tara, I think our body never heals unless we get into deep sleep. And I really feel that we're using our body during the day. We're using our body every time we're awake. And we're only healing it when we're asleep. And I also feel that most of us only gain mastery over the things that frighten us, the things that are most stressful in our life, which is right now the coronavirus, by dreaming. I think dreaming is how all animals gain mastery of their fears. So if we can sleep more, we might be able to reduce our anxiety as
Mm.
at the same time that we're healing our body physically.
Oh, I can actually speak to that at a personal level. I know that if I have had a bad night of sleep, I tend to feel just much more, you know, a much greater stress response to everything because I'm just not rested. And I know even say with my 11-year-old, when I see her and that same thing, I'll say, you know what? Your body is telling you to just give it a rest. And I'm trying to ingrain that in her at this young age. But you're right. The more stressed we are, the more we need this. And you mentioned deep sleep. So can you just talk about that for just a minute or two so people who aren't familiar with that will know what you mean?
Sure. We sleep in little blocks of time, and we have what's called light sleep, where we're still somewhat aware of our surroundings. And then we have deep sleep. And deep sleep is where there are very specific chemical things that are happening in our brain and our body. Deep sleep, I believe, is a specific phase where when you think about what we're doing when we repair, we're actually opening up the door for parts of our body to reproduce themselves. Repair is very much like growing or like reproducing ourselves. And if you think every single cell has the potential to reproduce itself, it has the DNA map to reproduce itself. When you're going to repair something, whatever it is in your body, you're opening up repair processes that have to be tightly supervised so that it doesn't go a little crazy and make two of that cell. You want to repair, but you don't want to make a second one.
Mm-hmm.
That means we actually have a state that we call awake, where we're using up things. And then we have a state where we are actually opening up dangerous processes under heavy supervision that allow us to remake our body. That is called deep sleep. During the 2 phases of deep sleep, we are paralyzed. We become paralyzed, theoretically, we think, so that we can repair moving parts. So deep
Interesting.
sleep is very different than light sleep. Both of them are interspersed together, and we alternate. It's as though we want to make sure that we're safe, because it's dangerous to be paralyzed. So we alternate light sleep with deep sleep throughout the night.
You know, it almost reminds me of when my son, my firstborn, I was, you know, an infant, and I was really trying to key into his sleep patterns and really sort of, you know what was going on. And I would see it sort of cycling through, you know, every, I guess it was like 45 minutes or something, and he would stir, you know, and you would try to make sure that he wouldn't wake up, because you don't want an infant waking up in the middle of the night. But what also is interesting that you said was, you know, growing versus repair. So is it like, you know, when you're younger, the main process is for growth, and then as you get older and you're done growing, quote unquote, that same thing shifts now to a repair mode instead?
Yes. So one of the most interesting discoveries in the last 10 years, in my view, is that the first phase of deep sleep that we enter is called slow wave sleep. That is the same as deep sleep if you're using a sleep tracker. So an Oura Ring or a Fitbit calls the first phase of deep sleep, that usually falls between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. They call that deep sleep. The sleep doctors call deep sleep either slow wave sleep, which is the first, or REM sleep. So it's a little confusing, but slow wave sleep is a phase of deep sleep during which growth hormone is released. In children, that is what matches paralysis and growth. You must be paralyzed in order to grow. As soon as we go through puberty, that same exact hormone still is linked to slow wave sleep, but it's released in a pulsatile way. So it's no longer continuous, it's now in pulses, regular pulses. To me, that suggests that we are using similar processes to what we use to grow. Both are during paralysis, both are tightly supervised.
Interesting. And I know from, again, having, you know, interviewed you and having read, you know, your work, that you have said that if indeed we are getting sufficient sleep that is of the right quality, that we really wouldn't necessarily need to have knees replaced or hips replaced if we're allowing our bodies to do that repair, really, right? And so, I mean,
Yes, there are humans walking around at age 90 who haven't had their joints replaced.
yeah.
And they're walking around at age 20, haven't had their joint. When you think about that, means it's a self-assembling, self-healing, living being that remakes joints every night. So
That's
they
pretty,
last. Lasting 20 years seems like routine to us, but
yeah.
lasting 20 years is an extraordinary thing.
Right,
I mean,
right.
if we get paralyzed and we repair all of our joints, they last for a very long time.
Yeah, it's something I think that we haven't necessarily been encouraged to think about or explore, right? And maybe it's really high time for us to start looking at what our bodies can actually do if we let our bodies do what they need to do, which primary, you know, is sleeping, right? So, okay, so I think we can say clearly, you know, we know now, you know, the value or the essentiality of sleep for our health. So then let's talk a little bit about roadblocks. Like, so what would be reasons? I mean, why are people not sleeping, basically?
Let me say that what I'm going to talk about is the piece that I found and the piece that I have on my website. It doesn't mean that all the other coaching aspects of computer, turning out your light, all the sleep hygiene advice is not valid. Okay, that's all valid. What I have added is something in addition, which is that most of us in the developed world have become vitamin D deficient. That vitamin D deficiency affects our ability to sleep. Vitamin D has direct input on our ability to fall asleep, stay asleep, and get paralyzed. Vitamin D also is a growth factor to the normal microbiome. It is quite obvious that when the vitamin D deficiency epidemic began, the microbiome started to fail at the same time. And as the microbiome has failed, there have been multiple other diseases that have come from that. The one I think is most important is that the bugs in our belly actually provide things that allow us to sleep normally. If you don't have the normal bugs, you will not sleep normally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, again, from having read your work, you really show the progression, as you said, the shift in sun exposure, and then the incidence of things like irritable bowel syndrome and all. It really is incredibly compelling to look at the way you've done it. And I also know from your program, when I started looking at my sleep, and I was monitoring my D levels, they were at what I guess the recommended the USRDA allowance would be, and I did increase them. And boy, when I got them almost doubled what I had been initially, that's when I really saw a huge shift in my sleep and began feeling it the next day too. So I can say yes. My personal experience and everything that you were talking about doesn't need work. It's true and everything. So
that's a weird part of having anything to do with vitamin D. It's a very controversial subject, and ultimately every single human being just needs to get their D between 60 and 80 and see what they notice. Because it's not something that I just thought up. I observed clinically over this particular part where the beginning of this, over 1,000 patients got their Ds to 60 to 80, and they said, yeah, my sleep is better. So we published that, and now it's over 8,000 people. You can experience it yourself. It's not mysterious, and it doesn't have to have a controlled trial.
Right. Yeah, it's funny too. I used to go back to my son. I would notice when he was in elementary school that during the summer, this kid was growing 2 to 3 inches over the 2 months. And I was thinking,
Yes.
Oh, it must be like the stress of the school day is not there, and, not having to wake up as early and whatever. But it probably was also, certainly longer sleep, but also the vitamin D enabling that better sleep. So it really, when I read all your stuff, it really just, everything just clicked, and it just said, well, this makes perfect sense. And then, like you said, you've experienced this clinically with your patients, and as a neurologist. So it works for me. So tell me, if there is, if people are sitting here, how can people overcome the difficulty of, we've talked about vitamin D. I think that's probably a big part of it. What can people do? And I think you have a program as well too to guide people.
I have a program called RightSleep. I have a workbook. We've just put out a second edition workbook to make it a program that's easier to understand, and for every single lay person, whether they have any science background or not, should be easily able to understand what to do. The ask for right this moment is a little bit difficult because we don't have access to D supplements everywhere in the US right now, but we're going into the summer, and one of the things that we can all do as summer comes, April, May, June, we can go out in the sun more. So one of the things that's really challenging about calling vitamin D a vitamin is that it has nothing to do with nutrition. It's not from food. It is really from sun exposure. So as we've been told that being exposed to the sun is dangerous, and we've all moved indoors, our whole physiology has changed. Vitamin D is a hormone. It happens to be made from sun hitting the skin. And that is completely tied to our sleep in a seasonal way, so that in the winter we sleep longer, in the summer we sleep shorter. That has guaranteed our survival on this planet for a long time. At the moment, what we have access to, which is actually quite fortunate, is vitamin D in a pill form. So the reason why this chemical is a little unique is that most animals make vitamin D in their fur. So I have a furry jacket on. Usually I would lick my fur, So all animals lick their fur or their scales or they preen their feathers, and they get the vitamin D that they make in oils in their feathers through their mouth. That means we can actually take it orally and we can absorb it directly. During the summer, which in most of the US, continental US, is probably, this is generalized because it's such a big change in latitude from south of Florida to Maine, but most of the time you can make vitamin D from, in a general sense, Memorial Day to Labor Day, with a little bit more in the south and in the north, that sort of thing. So there are a limited number of months that you can make it on your skin and absorb it. So most of us are not out enough, even during those months, to make the amount of vitamin D we need for the entire year in order to sleep normally.
Right, right, and then there's also the consideration too, if even if we are out, there's a high likelihood that we have put sunscreen on out of fear of skin cancer, right? So is there a recommendation or something for a time of day that it might be, more acceptable to be out, to get the vitamin D, from the sun, but minimize the risk of the exposure?
This is still a very controversial area, but some people believe that the UVB light that makes vitamin D is actually less dangerous than the UVA light. UVA light is available all year long. So the reason why D is made on the skin from UVB light is that is the only light that varies with the seasons. So that particular wavelength can't enter and get all the way down to the surface of the planet. In general, the time that you can get UVB light is 11 to 2, so the highest amount of overhead sun exposure. The difficulty has been that because we have been very focused on vitamin D as a bone vitamin instead of vitamin D as a hormone that controls hundreds of things in our body, when the dermatologist came out and said, sun exposure is dangerous, there were none of us standing next to them saying, gee, aren't you kind of concentrating on your organ of the body and ignoring the 50 other organs of the body that need vitamin D to thrive? So that means we haven't really done the proper steps to acknowledge that every single human being makes D differently on their skin. Every single person has a different skin type. Even if you're dark skinned, you can actually make D quickly or make D slow. Every person is unique. That means you don't really know the speed at which you make vitamin D until you actually have done vitamin D blood levels and spent X amount of time out in the sun. You really don't know that. Also, it's rather complex because the UVB light that makes vitamin D on our skin was designed to then make vitamin D active form to go into the skin cells and repair the DNA damage that was induced by the UVB light. So in the right circumstances, if you have a skin type that is adapted to where you are on the planet, you were actually designed to be out in the sun all day. Every animal spends all day out in the sun, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. We go to our little hut to sleep at night. But every single animal spends their entire day out in the sun unless you're a nocturnal animal. And unfortunately, this particular chemical was studied in rats, and they don't get vitamin D from sun exposure because they're nocturnal. So the whole view of this as a nutrition is because rats must use the vitamin D that's in their food, which is made by fungus that grows on the wheat. And it took years, and it's really not gotten into most of the scientists' heads, and definitely not into the clinician's practice, that this was studied in the wrong sort of animal, and therefore this is not about nutrition. This is about habit. This is about going outside. This is about humans must be outdoors to live a normal life.
So basically, we are operating from a study that really wasn't set up in a way that could give us the information that we really needed. And so we need a real shift in our thinking that accurately reflects what we know now, that we need to have vitamin D, not because of bones in and of themselves, but because it is impactful on so many organs in the body, really, and of course sleep as well. So in your workbook, do you walk people through the process then of how to look at their vitamin D and monitor their sleep and that sort of thing?
Yes, that's the whole point. So I've made it as easy to follow as possible within the context of understanding that every single human is different, and that every single person, we have all failed in the similar way. So there's a specific stepwise failure if you live indoors. The D goes low, the microbiome, the bugs that live inside us need that vitamin D in order to thrive. When they go bad, they were supplying us with hundreds of things that have to do with the immune system and other chemicals that have to do with our nervous system, our sleep, and also our level of anxiety. That means one of the biggest and most important things to do in this protocol is to bring back the microbiome. And that is really the revolutionary part of what I'm doing. Vitamin D is one of the things that the microbiome wants, but the other things that they want are B vitamins, the 8 B vitamins. You've probably never thought of this, but why would we call 8 different chemicals B vitamins? The first vitamin was A, and then there's 8 things called B. Like,
Right.
with that? Why didn't they do B, C, D? So it turns out those 8 chemicals are the basis of our biology, and we can't make any of them because they were all made by bacteria. They were actually bacterial growth factors. They were discovered in the liquid that we use to make beer and bread, and they were purified, and then we were using them to grow bacteria in little petri dishes, and then somebody said, well, oh, I wonder if humans need these. Yes, but the supply was always as an 8-pack from the bacteria that lived inside us. In order to bring those bacteria back, and you have some of them, even if you have the wrong microbiome, even if you have IBS, even if you have ulcerative colitis, there are some of the good guys still living inside you. What you have to do is change their environment to favor the healthy foursome. It's simple to do. It's 3 months of vitamin D and B50. B50 means 50 milligrams or 50 micrograms of each one of this 8-pack of bacterial growth factors. Those guys make these 8 chemicals. That's what they need to live. They exist in a little bee soup that they make. What we're doing is we're priming their environment by giving them those 8 and the D, and they get really happy and they all grow back. And at the end of the 3rd month, you have to stop the B50 because now they are providing all the Bs that your body was designed to have. And presto, your microbiome is back. Now, the important piece of that is you have just been living your life without an important organ of your body. You've been walking around surviving without your liver or your kidneys or your brain. Now you have this new organ of your body. That's a very weird way to think of it, but that is really an organ of the body that's been doing hundreds of things for us. It does the same thing for every animal on the planet.
Let me just ask a question. What do you mean? Are you talking about the gut, the repaired gut is the organ?
That intestinal contents. So I believe it's most of the small intestine, but this population of bacteria have been doing hundreds of things for us. I think that it's been running the absorption of small charged ions like iron, selenium, copper, iodine. There was an organ of the body that has been running this forever. No one measured those. The squirrels outside are not holding up little signs saying, give me zinc. Somebody was managing that. And we are now measuring those things and finding them disordered. And since my clients didn't really start to be able to absorb iron until their microbiome came back, I think there's a big basis for saying many of the diseases that we see and the things that we measured as physicians are a result of trying to run your body without this organ. Picture the issues about immunization in the same way. So we have from 1945 until 1980 a long span of time of devising immunizations, and they worked on that population. But then you start to have humans born on the planet that have a totally different immune system, because an organ of the body that runs the immune system is not present. So now we
Mm,
go forward 40 years, we give the same immunizations to children who are missing an organ of their body. Their immune system is totally different. We give them an immunization that worked fine in me, but it screws them up. It's not that the immunization has changed, it's that this population has the wrong microbiome. If they
mm,
don't have it, their body is not really complete. Once you
mm.
bring it back, that is then day one of that organ doing its job. That means it's not going to be back to normal that day. It's going to start doing its work.
Right,
That means that the sleep is extremely important. You have
right, right.
to then say, now I'm going to sleep with this important organ of the body. So now I have all the necessary parts to make my sleep restorative.
Hmm. So I love your always your holistic perspective, because we do tend to isolate, look at isolated things. And what we really do need to look at is the body and how it's working, because it is, an exquisitely designed,
It's a miracle. It really is miraculous.
but we shouldn't segment it. And we do. And so what we really need to do is really adopt more of a holistic perspective, just as you're describing. And then also you're saying, changes, generational changes will absolutely mean that there will be different responses. And so thankfully, I think we're moving more towards that real, what's the term they use, like individualized medicine. I forget what the thing is, really like personalized. So hopefully we'll be able to get at some of that through that. But first and foremost, as you've said, let's look at the whole body. Let's look to restore this organ, and let the body do exactly what it was designed to do. Um,
Can I
now,
add something in comment to what you said there?
yeah.
The other thing that I think is miraculous is if we take the entire population of kids who have been born in the last 20 years, that because their mother's D level is so low during pregnancy, and their mother's D level is so low during breastfeeding, that child doesn't have enough D to build the right microbiome.
Mm,
But when you bring back the D and you give that child back the microbiome, the brain knows exactly what it's supposed to do. Once the microbiome is recreated, the brain says, wow, everything's back. It
yeah.
will pick up where it left off. So in
Hmm.
my view, autism, Asperger's, developmental delay, you have no idea what your child can accomplish until you put the microbiome back and you let them sleep. You encourage their brain with every single piece they're lacking. I have seen autism go away when they're sleeping. It's not just the microbiome, it's a microbiome that's intact and enough sleep with the proper requirements. The brain knows what to do. Doctors
Mm,
don't ever fix anything. We put little patches on things. The
right, to
body
manage.
is the miracle. It knows exactly what to do to
Yeah.
grow
Yeah.
and finish development.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of, I have background in educational psychology, and so a lot of developmental psychology, and they always talk about how kids grow unevenly. You'll see language be, an area for one kid, or motor skills be an area for another kid, and that's all fine because each kid is different. But if you think about a kid who is not sleeping for a variety of reasons, not getting the sleep that they really need, and they have a finite amount of time to sleep each night, then any of those areas will end up being underserved. And usually the language one is the last, the last one to get its ration, and so it really does, you know, make sense with what you're saying. So wow, I think we had a much even a much bigger conversation than I thought, but it all goes back to the whole idea of sleep. And actually, if there are families that are home, because we're all home now, and they're having a harder time because their resources have been removed for if they have a child with special needs or something, then maybe this is indeed a great conversation for them to hear, to say, hey, there's another avenue to explore, to really maybe get to see the child who really is inside that body. So wonderful. So, Dr. Gominak, where would any viewer be able to find your book?
My website is www.drgominak.com. And on the home page, you can go and order the workbook. I really encourage everyone to look around on the home page, look around on all the learning sections, read as much as possible, see if the ideas that are there fit with your personal experience of your life. This is not something that you want to take on without really understanding what you're doing. And it's my view that vitamin D is a dangerous chemical. It affects everything about our body. So it's worth it to learn more about it, and to learn that the focus is not vitamins so much as it is the focus is on sleep. Anything that you do, you're always watching, did that make my sleep better or worse? And the parts that I have on my website are things that haven't yet been reported. So all the other additional interventions that the other health experts have are still of value. But if they haven't worked for you, then simple, cheap vitamin regimen and following your sleep over a year can really make a huge impact on how you do.
I agree. Yeah. And just to loop back on something that you said. So yeah, people may have difficulty because they're not getting enough sleep for the reasons you mentioned, screens or, eating, going to bed on a full stomach, a variety of different things. And then if you've tried all of that sleep hygiene stuff and you are still under rested, waking up tired, needing caffeine, napping, all the things I used to do. Then you really need to look to the next level and see maybe it's more of like a sleep quality kind of thing. And then, and Dr. Gominak, your program really does help somebody walk through that. And it's not a take a pill thing, like you said. I mean, so many of our solutions are like that. You have to go into this with your mind, knowing you're going to monitor, the sleep that you get. You also have to get blood work done, all those things, but it can make such a huge difference. And once you get your sleep restored, I mean, your whole life can just be so much better, so much improved. So thank you so much for talking with us today, Dr. Gominak. I really appreciate your ideas, your enthusiasm, your program. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Terry, can I just add that you can also work with me individually. You can make a getting to know you appointment where we can talk about your specific challenges, and you can add that information to the workbook, or you can choose to work with me for a whole year as well. Those opportunities are there on the website under a menu tab called Work Together.
Okay, great. Thank you for adding that in. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tara.